You can always rely on the Sydney Morning Herald to barrack for left-wing causes with a headline that often doesn't stack up to closer scrutiny. And it was typical this morning, proclaiming that electric car sales hit overdrive. Indeed, the paper enthused further, declaring that electric car sales have more than tripled. And while they might have been factually correct, the devil is always in the detail, with electric car sales moving from a very minute 0.2% of all car sales to an almost just as insignificant 0.6% of car sales. Not quite 7,000 electric cars were sold last year. Now, in total sale terms, that's just over half of 1% of the million or so cars of all type sold in Australia each year. But I'm afraid that the otherwise admirable British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has jumped on the same bandwagon, announcing this week that no new petrol or diesel-powered cars would be sold in Britain after 2035. And using facts a bit like the Sydney Morning Herald does, the British PM was pleased to report, he said, that an electric car is being sold in Britain every 15 minutes. But think about it. That's just under 100 a day, or 36,000 electric vehicles per annum, or in comparative terms, just 1.6% of the almost 2.5 million new vehicles sold last year in the UK. Now, if people want to drive an electric car, you won't get any complaint from me. I just expect them to pay for it, both in terms of the purchase price and to keep it going without taxpayer support. It wasn't so long ago that the now Treasurer Josh Frydenberg put $100 million on the table to help people buy an electric car. That's it. $100 million of your money. Even though the sort of people who buy a Tesla with a sticker price ranging from anything like $67,000 to $260,000 plus, well, they can more than afford to buy their Tesla themselves. And cost aside, while electric cars might work down the track on a little island like Britain, or even in the inner suburbs of big cities here, who wants to add an extra couple of hours to a drive around regional Australia? That's even if you could find a fast charging station. As people lined up to get petrol on New Year's Eve to evacuate out of our fire-ravaged regions, all I could think about was, thank God, the hundreds and hundreds of cars waiting in a queue for a petrol bowser weren't all waiting to use the one or two charging stations in town. Don't even get me started on electric fire trucks. But it will all be okay, say the climate barrackers, the common sense deniers I now call them. They just argue that the government needs to start subsidising the installation of fast charging stations, as well as keep subsidising electric cars to make them cheaper. Just like we now subsidise supposedly cheap wind and solar power. Well, no. This is precisely the problem. Look at everything recommended in the name of combating climate change, and most of it, certainly the rampant taxpayer-funded subsidisation, is nothing more than socialism masquerading as environmentalism. More taxes, more subsidies, more regulation, more government control, and all of these things, aren't they? They are supposedly everything the Conservative governments and centre-right political parties say they're against. Make no mistake, much of the climate cult is a Trojan horse that Conservatives should never drag into the heart of their policy citadel. But in the Coalition's party room this week, some of them were back trying exactly to do that. Now, I'm all in favour of protecting the planet. Practical environmentalism, as every Conservative knows, it's the basis of a Conservative's instinct to preserve what's good in the world. Clean water, clean air, pristine bush, beautiful communities. We want to protect them all as much as anyone. And I want lower emissions too, but it's just that I would never support lowering emissions if the price is unaffordable, unreliable electricity, or the destruction of heavy industry and jobs in Western countries, the disappearance of meat from our diets, sheep mobs and cattle herds from our farmers' paddocks and drastic changes to everyone's lifestyle. It should be obvious to every half-smart centre-right politician that having lost the arguments over economics, the Marxist left is now having another go via the Trojan horse of climate change. Action to protect our environment is one thing. You'd hardly find a voter that dissents. But being stupid enough to open up the gates and let the Trojan horse in, only to find it's nothing about water, sky, the bush, or indeed humanity, is madness. Because all of this is just the latest and most desperate push by the left to fundamentally re-engineer Western societies like our own.